GDP as well as GNP, there is what you call is net domestic product as well as net national product. The difference between these gross the gross as well as the net is the capital consumption, is the net in capital consumption and this capital consumption in the process of our production is known as your depreciation. This is the capital consumption is known as your depreciation. So to calculate your NDP, say your at factor cost or GDP or NNP at factor cost, so you want to calculate your net domestic product at factor cost is equal to your GDP at factor cost minus depreciation. And similarly, you can calculate your NNP at factor cost, which we said as the national income, as equal to your GNP at factor cost minus your depreciation. Similarly, in each country, we have what you call is the government as well as private sector. Probably in recent years in India, in recent times, like even in yesterday's speech of your Prime Minister, the government is going for more private sector in the business and less of your government sector in producing goods and services. Most often that not in all countries, we have both government as well as private sector participating in production of goods and services. Therefore, we can calculate our private sector or the private income, personal disposable income, and so forth. We can calculate this private income from your national income. As you know, your national income is your NNP at factor cost, and from this national income we can calculate the private income. The essence of this is, from the national income, if you take away the income generated by government and then you add the income of private individuals which are not part of the national income, or in the sense are not part of our GDP, then we'll end up with what we call is the private income. So you can calculate your private income as equal to your national income, that is your net national product at factor cost, minus income of government administration departments from entrepreneurship and property, that is, for example, in case of railways, post office, telegraphs department, and so forth. that is the income of the government administrative department. Then earning of government non-department enterprises such as your public sector unit like your NTPC, National Thermal Power Corporations, the earning from there when they are producing. Earlier government also owned many of the public sector units which in course of time has been given to the private sector to run those public sector units. So when we have these public sector enterprises earning from that, we are deducting from the national income. Then what we are left with the private income. Again, we are adding what we call is the national debt interest on domestic debt. Why we are adding that to GDP? Because the national debt interest, the debt interest paid on the domestic debt is not part of our GDP, but it is part of your income. Like for instance, you are giving me a loan. Say I'm an enterprise and you are a private individual. You gave me say 10 crores loan to me. Then I am paying you the interest rate. That interest rate is not part of the what you call is production process. So but that is part of your income. That income you are earning is part of your income, but it's not producing anything. In that sense, that should be what you call is private income. Similarly, the transfer payment by the government departments, like the old age pension given to the people. The old age pension is not part of our GDP, but it is part of our private income. The transfer payment, like say in case of very many states, 500 rupees each month is given to people beyond the age of 60. Then that 500 rupees for those elderly people become their income. So that becomes their private income, but it is not part of our GDP because, or our national income, because in case of GDP or the NNP at the factor cost, we are not adding of those transfer payment. Similarly, we are adding OTA, that is other current transfer from abroad, like from foreign countries we are getting transfer payment. Then those transfer payment also added to private individual because that constitute our private income, but they do not added into our calculations of our GDP. So once we have private income, we can from that we can calculate what you call is the personal income. So what do you mean by this private income? Income in the hand of private entities, and there are say private business or the private individual. That is what we call private income. So income in the hands of private economic agents is what we call is the private income. Then we say the personal income, we can get it from the private income minus your retained earnings of the nation's private corporate sector. What this retained earning is, say if you have a private corporate sector and say you are earning 100 crores as the profit, then that profit, all of the profits are not distributed amongst the, say you are three or four persons are the owner of that private enterprise. all of them do not get 25 crores each. What they do is, let's say they retain 20 crores of their profit in the private corporate sector, and then distribute the rest 80 crores to the four owners. Then each one of them get 20 crores. Rather than 25 crores each one of private income, 25 as the crores as their private income. Now their private income is only 20 crores. That is what we call is the 20 crores they kept in the private sector is their retained earnings. Then the corporate taxes paid by the corporate sector deducted from the private income constitute what you call is our private income. So your private income is nothing, sorry, personal income is nothing but private income minus your retained earnings minus your corporate taxes. Then we can calculate private disposable income, that is your PDI. So your private disposable income is private income minus household direct taxes minus your miscellaneous receipt of government administrations and department. So what do you mean by this private disposable income? If you can loosely speak, the money in your hand which you can spend, that is your disposable income. So from the personal income we can deduct the direct taxes, because direct taxes given are not in your hand to spend. Similarly, the fees you are paying, it's not to the government agencies, or the fine you are paying are not with you to spend. That money is not with you to spend. That is why we deduct those things. However, it may be worth mentioning that your miscellaneous received by the government administration departments, such as your fees as well as your fines, constitute a very minor part of that. Therefore, we can say private disposable income is equal to your private income minus your direct taxes. Let's look at one example for India, how we can calculate all those related concepts related to GDP and GNP. Yeah. So as you can see here, we have given the GDP at factor cost as well as your indirect taxes and subsidies. Then we can add the indirect taxes and subsidies to your GDP at factor cost. As you can see, we can calculate GDP at market prices. GDP at market prices as your GDP at factor cost plus your indirect taxes minus your subsidy. Then from the GDP at market prices, if you are adding the net factor income, then we can get GNP at market prices. So GNP at market prices is equal to your GDP at market prices plus NIA, that is net factor income and abroad. And from the gross national product at market prices, if you have capital consumption, or in other words what we call the capital consumption as depreciation, then you can calculate our NDP at factor cost and NNP at factor cost. Our NDP at factor cost is GDP at factor cost minus your capital consumption or your depreciation, and similarly your NNP at factor cost is equal to your NDP at factor cost plus your net factor earnings from abroad. Or other way we can calculate, you have GDP at market prices, you can calculate GDP at factor cost, and then you can calculate NNP at factor cost as GNP at factor cost minus capital depreciation. Now, similarly, you have once you have an NP at factor cost, that is your national income. From the national income, you can calculate the private income as we have discussed earlier. Your private income is equal to national income, that is your NNP at factor cost, minus your income of the government administrative department, and minus the government income of the government enterprises, plus your national debt interest and the transfer payment within the country as well as outside the countries. That gives you the private income. From the private income, you can calculate now your personal income as your private income minus your retained earning and corporate. That is given by you the serial number 7. And that is how we, as we discussed, this is this table gives you the some concept, those concept how applied in case of India, how we have applied those concept of GDP and its related concept in India. If we look at this table carefully, what do we see? We see that if you see the difference between two of the concept, like if you see the difference between the market price and factor cost, say your GDP at factor cost and GDP at your market prices. If you see that these differences stand about 9%, 9%. Similarly, if you see the gross domestic product as well as your national income, the difference is around 1%. Similarly, if you look at the gross and net income differences, that comes around 11%. So in that sense, you can see that around 11% is our capital consumption or the depreciation. Similarly, if you look at the private and national income, which is approximate 9%, that implies your government involvement is around 9%. Similarly, your personal income and national income, as you can see from this figure, is shrinking and currently stands at maybe more than 1%. So these are the things we can observe from this table, and I will advise you to look at the recent national income aggregate from CSO or from RBI. I have already given those links in your previous slides, so you can just go there and check what is their ratios and how these figures are played out. So this is a homework you should do by yourself, and that also that will be part of your test as well.
Is there any specific reason for the negative values of net factor income earned abroad?
What do you mean by this net factor income and abroad? Thank you for the questions. Actually, nobody asked, so I didn't get into that. So whenever you have net, the term net, then usually it is something minus something. Say like your x minus y sort of thing. Okay, that gives you a net. So here when you are saying this net factor income and abroad, then there are factors of production of other countries are employed in India. Similarly, factors of productions are employed in other countries. So India receive factor income from abroad, as well as India receive factor income from abroad when India's factors of productions are employed in other countries. Similarly, India pays factor incomes to the factors of productions of other countries employed within India. So what we receive and minus what we pay, that is your net factor income. So in other words, what you're saying is how much factors income we are earning by employing our factors of production in other countries minus what we are paying to the factors of production of other countries employed in India. That gives you that net factor income. That implies more of the factors of productions are employed in India than the factors of production of India employed outside India. Let me give you a simple example that will tell you. Let's say only factors of production used is labor. So how many laborers from other country or workers from other country are employed in India? Then the Indian enterprise are paying to that labor. Let's say India is paying, let's say only the labor are coming from Bangladesh. So we are paying to these Bangladeshi laborers who are employed in India some wages. That is factor payment to the Bangladeshi workers. Let's say we are paying 1,000 rupees to them. Similarly, Indians are say working in Bangladesh. So the Bangladesh is paying to the Indians as wages. Say they are paying 900 rupees. So 900 rupees is our receipt and 1,000 rupees is our payment. So that receipt of factor income minus payment of factor income, that is your net factor income. So in this case, that will be minus 100 rupees. That is why we have this net factor income and abroad figures are negative. Did you follow?
Yes, sir. But
Okay.
sir, then we should aim to make it positive because
yes. What happens is in the modern world, labor is a very small part of that factor income. Labor income are. Okay. In case of India, our income is mostly the factor income and through labor. Okay. So that is the wages that like your many of you people will be going out and then say working somewhere outside India, and the wages you get is India's factor income. But what happens in case of India is we get more of factors of production in terms of capital, like you have Maruti Suzuki or other foreign government, foreign enterprises spend capital investment. Their income is more. That is why it is very, we have a negative. India enterprises or the capital in other countries is limited. And as you know, in recent times, what has happened is the reward to the factors production is skewed towards the factors of production of capital. So if you have more capital, then the reward you will get in capital as compared to the other factors of production is very high. So that is why other countries' factor production in India is mostly in the form of capital. So that is why they get a more share as the earning, and that is why we have negative. Until we have indigenous capitals or capital from our own country, or Indians are investing in other countries in the capital, this net factor income and abroad will mostly be remain negative.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So these are the various concepts. As well, I will advise you to look into the recent data. These are up to 11-12, and I will advise you to look into the data for recent years. Particularly, you can look at the data from the RBI or the CSO, Central Statistical Organization, as well as you can look at from the what you call is the economic survey chapter 1, the recent economic survey chapter 1. Further, we had discussed what you call is different approaches to GDP, like your value added approach and income approach, as well as your expenditure approach. We have discussed them already. Why if there are no measurement errors, then all three should represent or also gives you the same level of GDP. And this is the example I had given you in the case of value added approach. I would like to what you say is, in case of your income approach, we add the income of different economic agents, like you have labor and wages, that is your labor and your wages W. For the services they renders to the producer. Similarly, profits that P for entrepreneurship, and income for the self-employment, as well as you have capital and rental income R for renting out structure and equipments, and similarly interest I on money lending to the producers we receive. Here the profit is equal to your dividend products, return earnings plus your corporate taxes, or in other words, here the profit is profit before taxes. The other point I would like to add here is, see, if you have a farm, then people are working, they get wages, and the entrepreneurs get profit, and the where the farm is, the land or the capital or the building they have, they pay rent, and the money they have borrowed from the say bank or others, but they pay interest that gives you this income approach. And as you see, your income approach provides you net domestic product at the factor cost. However, in cases where you have what you call is the single person who is the labor himself, and who is the entrepreneur himself or herself, and who use his or her say own structure or own land, and who invest their own money there, then in that case the earning from that enterprises, like a tea stall, the simplest example you can think of like a tea stall. Say tea stalls you have, and in that tea stall the labor is of that person, and the money it's spending on that is his own or her own, and then say the capital or the say house they are using, or the small what you can say a small building they are using to have this tea shop is of his or her own. Then in that case we do not have this division, because then the whatever the earning is belongs to that individual. In that case we do not have this division of W, P, R and I, because all of them together go to those individual, and those individual are known as your self-employment. They are self-employed. So when we have this self-employed, the income earned is your known as your mixed income. Mixed income. And in most particularly many of the developing countries, the self-employment is the highest. For instance, in case of India, we have almost 53% of our labor force are in self-employed form. So when we have such a large chunk of population engaged in self-employment, then this mixed income constitute a big part of our income. As we will see in the next slide, here you see a compensation to the employees, that is the wages constitute compensation of employees constitute a major chunk, followed by what you see is the mixed income. Almost you see in recent years 64.4% of our NDP at factor cost is from mixed income. So as you see, mixed income is a major part of this our income, and that can, so in the income approach we always have what you call is a component called mixed income. So that is the highest share of these high share of mixed income in our NDPR factor cost. Similarly, one point needs to be stressed in the case of income approach, sorry, expenditure approach. If you look at the expenditure approach, and in the expenditure approach, we say this is consumption expenditure, investment expenditure, government expenditure, and the net exports. In that case, we have the consumption expenditures contributes mostly the highest. In case of India, if you see, it is consumption expenditure almost 55-56% of India's expenditures in the consumption expenditures. Okay. Now let us look at few examples how they are played out in the context of our measurement of GDP. So you can see from this slide that consumption expenditure is a very major, is the largest component of our GDP in case of India. So now let us look at few examples. Okay, the first example is Maruti Suzuki buys a new robot with 1 crore made in India for its factory in Gurgaon. Whether this should be the 1 crore spent by Maruti Suzuki should be part of our GDP or not. Any answer? Whether this is part of our GDP or not. The 1 crore.
Yes, sir, it should be.
Yeah, it should be, because what you see is this is a new product, because in case of something to be part of our GDP, we should look at two things. It should be creating new goods and services. Okay, so here it is producing a new robot, and where it is produced, as we have discussed earlier, in case of GDP, the location matter, and it is produced in India. That is why this is part of our that will be included in our GDP. The second question, example you see, Krishna Traveler, your car rental enterprise at IIT Kharagpur, let's say spend 1 crore on 10 new cars that are made in India. So this 1 crore spent by Krishna Travelers on 10 new cars. These are new cars. So one component is fulfilled, but where they are produced, the location they are produced in Japan. Therefore, they are not part of our GDP. They are not part of our, this 1 crore spent by Kharagpur is not part. In fact, this the 1 crore spent by the Krishna Traveler is our imports. And as you see, imports are deducted from our GDP. If you remember C plus I plus G X minus M, then imports are deducted. Similarly, in the second example, the 1 crore spent by Krishna Traveler on 10 new cars that are made in Gurugram Maruti Suzuki plant, then that there are new cars as well as they are made in Gurugram, which is located near Delhi, and therefore this 1 crore is part of our GDP. The other example is your Korean car manufacturer in Korea buy a new robot worth 1 crore made in India. So the robot is made in India and it is new, and this is part of our GDP, and this is a Korean car manufacturer in Korea buys this. That implies it's a exports from India. As you remember, exports are added to our GDP, so that constitute part of our GDP. Similarly, in the other example, you buy 1 lakh of Reliance stock. So in that case, when you are buying Reliance stock, here we are, though the transaction in India, like you are buying from say Bombay Stock Exchange, then what you see is when you are buying the stock of Reliance from the Bombay Stock Exchange, in that case, there are no new goods and services produced. So no new goods are produced. Therefore, that 1 lakh rupees is not part of our GDP. Similarly, is a Reliance buy 100 crores of Amazon stock. In that case, there are no new products are generated. Therefore, that 100 crores also is not part of our GDP. Similarly, if you see the government social security department pays 20,000 rupees to a retiree person, so that 20,000 to a retiree person is nothing but a transfer payment. So because it's a transfer payment and it does not create any services, then that is part of our GDP. But if the government social security department pays say 20,000 rupees to a employer in the department, so employees in the department or a worker in the department, then that 20,000 rupees will be part of our GDP. But in this case, because the person is retiree, therefore the person is not creating any new goods and services, so that is not part of our GDP. And the other example, like let's say the government social security department buys a new computer made in India. So the 40,000 they spend on the computer which is newly produced, and that is made in India. Therefore, that constitutes our GDP. So these are the few examples. I have tried to give you a diverse example so you can understand which is why something are part of GDP as well as which is not part of our GDP. Any questions? No? In that case, let me download your attendance. Okay.
Excuse me, sir. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, sir, like I have a request, sir. So next week we have a we have merit test, sir. So can you please extend the deadline of assignment submission to
Yes,
next week, please?
Yes, sir. It will
See,
be very
the deadline is given to you well in advance. It is not I am giving you the deadline today and I am telling you is the 3rd. The deadline was set probably month back. If you ask me to change it, it does not help. I can change it. I don't have problem because I may. But what happens? Why I have requesting you people to submit on time. See, there are 500 students. And I'm the one. I am the single one who is going to evaluate them. So if you think of my positions, it's 500 assignment. I know all of you will write minimum of 10 pages on a diverse type of issue. I have to go through them at least once. For that I need time. I have to go through. That is why maximum I can extend it up to March 10. After that, please don't ask me.
Yeah, that will be fine, sir.
Okay,
March
so
10.
Yes, sir.
because I have to evaluate all 500 assignments before your say April first week or so. So I need 1 month time.
Yes.
Even one. So if you have taken your attendance, those who have classes or anything else, you can leave. Anyone has any questions or clarifications can step back and ask.
Thank you, sir.
So could you please explain what is the meaning of capital consumption or depreciation in the NNP at factor cost or NDP at factor cost?
Oh, okay. So when you are producing something, you are using capital. And in the process of production, some part of the capital is used off, and that is what we call is the capital consumptions or depreciations. I'll give you a few examples, probably that they will help you. Let's think of a tailor shop which stitches your clothes. So in the tailor shop, the capital used by the shop is the sewing machine. So when it stitches your clothes, some part of the sewing machine is used off. There are some wear and tears happens to that. Therefore, the sewing machine does not last for say infinite time horizon. It does not have a lifespan of infinite time horizon. It has a specific time horizon because in that specific time period, whatever the capital, swing machine then become what you call is not usable. Similarly, you think of a car rental company like your Krishna Travel. It has cars. So when it is using the cars in the process of production, so the production they are producing is the service of transportation. So when Krishna Travel is producing the service of transportation, in that production of service of transportation, it is using one of its capital. One of its capital is, say, the cars. So the cars, when it is used in the transportations, there are wear and tears happen to that car. Therefore, say after 15-20 years, the car is damaged and it cannot run, and so there is they have to get a new car and so forth. So that is the part of wear and tear happening to that car. Say when the car is running, it is damaging its say the engine, it damaging other parts of the car. So after a certain time, the car will not be usable, sort of thing. So whatever the damage it is happening in the process of, say, transportation, that is what we call is the capital consumption. So as you see here, it is very difficult to measure this. How much is the depreciation of any capital goods is very difficult to measure, because when the car is new, the damage happening, say the car is going from IIT Kharagpur to the Calcutta. If it is new, the wear and tears happening to the car when it is new is very small. If it is a very old car, then the wear and tear happening to that car will be high. So as the car, or the, in this case, in general, when the capital gets old, the capital consumptions become high. But at the initial stage, there may be low. So usually it is very difficult to capture or measure the capital consumption or the depreciation. But this is what we mean. What do you mean by capital consumption or the depreciation? In most cases, what happens, if you know the lifespan of a capital, like in the case of a car, you know that the car will last for 10 years, and then you can average out the depreciation. That is how we look at depreciation. In most countries, the depreciation is mostly